Welcome to the first part of this tutorial series on how to integrate VR with Stable Diffusion and Deforum animations. This is the proof of concept that I showed in my previous video, and we're going to start building the underwater environment that you see here. I found a 360 video on YouTube and used it to render out a frame as a PNG in Adobe Premiere. As you can see, the PNG format is equirectangular. And while the equirectangular image works very nicely with the sphere, as you can see here, creating a fairly good environment, we will need to map this image to a cube and use a cube as our skybox instead. Using a cube as a skybox works out easier for the purposes of this project. So we'll need to convert this equirectangular image to a cube map. There are a number of resources online that can help you do this. I found this one that is fast and easy. I'll put the URL in the video description. The first thing you need to do is make sure that the per face resolution is set to 1024. Then have your image ready. In my case, this underwater half-res image here is what I'm going to drag onto the website. And just like that, your cube map is creating. So we started with equirectangular and we went to cube. Click on download cube map zip file, which I already did. And when you open it up, you will see that you will have 6 square images, 1024 by 1024, representing the 6 faces of the cube. In addition, I would advise doing a screen capture of the actual cube map because you'll need this to reconstruct the cube when we go back to Unity. This tutorial series does require that you have at least a basic understanding of Unity. If you're new to Unity, I would suggest pausing the tutorial, going on YouTube, finding some tutorials that bring you up to speed, and then resuming once you're ready. At this point, we want to make sure that we're using the install 2021.3.8 F1 LTS. This is a stable install of Unity, and I've tested it in this project. It works with all plugins, and there are no issues. Once you've installed this version of Unity, you'll create a new project. Name the project as you like, save it somewhere in your hard drive, and make sure that you're creating a 3D URP project. URP stands for Universal Render Pipeline. We will need URP to run shader graphs since we'll have some custom shaders running in this project. First thing I'm going to do is create a new folder called My Assets, just to keep things neat and organized. And inside of the My Assets folder, I'm going to create another folder, call this Textures. We want to bring in the cube map images that we downloaded earlier. So here they are on my hard drive. Select them all, drag and drop them into textures. Now I have the 6 square images that represent each face of the cube, and I have this cube map reference that shows me how to put them together. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we're looking at the screen from the front. Now I'm going to right click, 3D object, and create a quad. I'm going to hold the Alt key down and use the left mouse to tumble around the scene. You can see that the quad is actually facing the wrong way. Since there are normals on only one side, the other side is transparent. We need to turn it around. So we're going to hold down the Control key and we're going to turn it 180 degrees on the Y-axis. I'm going to go back to the front again, and we have our first face of our cube. I'm going to rename this to quad underscore. Well, we'll start with the top. The next thing we need to do, now that we have our starting point, is to create our reference. So we're going to go 3D object, create plane. Again, tumble around with Alt to be able to see our plane. It comes in perfectly flat. We want to rotate it up 90 degrees. The x-axis, and we want to push it back in space so it's behind the quad. The next thing we're going to do is create a new folder in Assets and call this folder Materials. Right click, create a new material, call this Reference, and drop that material on your quad. Now, hopefully you've set this up to use the Universal Render Pipeline, so you should be able to access Universal Render Pipeline shaders. In this case, we're going to go down and change the shader from lit to unlit, so that when we drop an image into the slot for the material, we won't need any lighting. So I'm going to grab this image here, drop it into our base map, and you can see that we have a nice reference for how to build our cube map. Let me just scale this a little bit so it looks a little more reasonable, and pull it up so it's easier to see for me. And we're going to start building our cube map. So just to be economical here, we're going to just duplicate our reference material. We're going to rename this to top. We're going to go into the base map and select the top image. In this case, it's pretty easy to spot because it has this white dot here. That's the top image. So I'm going to just drag and drop this top image, which is PY. You can see it's correct. And then drag and drop this material onto our quad. And we have the first face of our cube ready to go. Okay, let's do a couple more together and then I'll fast forward the process. So we're going to do Control D to duplicate the top. And this quad here would represent the back of the box or the cube. Rename this back. I'm going to also rename this plane to reference while I'm here. Pull that down. We're going to duplicate the top material, rename it to back, drop it back onto this one, and now look for the back image, which will be the top portion of the turtle. So let's take a peek here as we cycle through. Looks like it's PZ. So make sure the back is selected, and then drag and drop PZ into the base map. Okay, let's do one more. Control D to duplicate. This is the bottom of the cube. So we're going to name this the bottom. We're going to duplicate our material, rename it to bottom. Drop bottom on the bottom quad. And now we're looking for the bottom of the turtle. So let's go through, find it. Oh, there it is. NY. And put NY into the base map. Okay, now that you know the process, I'm going to fast forward this, and when I'm done creating the rest of the quads, we'll come back and put the cube together. Okay, now we have the layout for our cube map, and we're going to go ahead and assemble the cube. So we start by rotating all the faces of the cube by holding the Control key down and rotating, in this case, on the y-axis, 90 degrees. So the faces are facing each other. Bottom ones, we're going to do 90 degrees on the x-axis. Bottom is up, top is down. Continuing until we've rotated all the faces properly. So actually, okay, this rotation wasn't complete. This one here has to actually go another 90, so full 180 because it's the front of the cube. I'm going to move this one over here into position. Now, Unity has a nice snapping feature, so it's going to make it really easy for us to assemble all the faces into a cube. Holding down the V key, making sure that you have the translate tool activated by clicking W or on this button there. Hold the V key down and pull the corner in to the corner of the cube you want to snap to the corner of the quad you want to snap to, rather. And you can see it's pretty easy to do this way. Bottom and the front. And the other side. That should be it. Okay, now that the cube is assembled, let's take a peek inside. So the first thing you're going to notice is there are these lines that are tracing the edges of each of the faces. And once you're in the environment, these will be glaringly obvious and will break the illusion that you're actually in a seamless environment. And I left this in intentionally because I wanted to make sure you saw what the problem looks like in case you encounter it. It's a simple fix to get rid of it. This has something to do with the way images are brought in through Unity's texture import process. And the way to get around this is to select all of the images that will be used in your cube, go up to texture type in the inspector, and select Sprite, 2D, and UI. Hit apply, and you'll see the edges go away. Okay. I just wanted to do a quick demo of what it looks like to be inside of the cube we just created. So this is a proper skybox. You can see the mapping is very nice. You don't see any seams. Gives a sense of volume inside of here. And this is going to be a really good base for us to use in Touchdesigner when we layer our animations on top of this. And that's going to be the next step in our process. So let's hop over to Touchdesigner and start the next step. Okay, here we are in an empty Touchdesigner scene. So I'm not an expert in Touchdesigner. I just learned the bare minimum to be able to accomplish the goals I had for this project. So you should only really need some beginner level skills in Touchdesigner to be able to do what we need to do. That being said, if anyone is a Touchdesigner expert or has any insight into how to do anything more effectively, more efficiently, please do let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear any feedback that would be helpful. So like many node-based systems, Touchdesigner works on nodes and edges, and we're only going to be using a couple nodes for this tutorial. And the way you get to the nodes is you right-click, hit Add Operator, and this dialog appears. Not going into details here. This is definitely not a Touchdesigner tutorial per se. For our purposes right now, all we care about is this tab here that says top. And one of the nodes that we are going to be using is this one called the movie file in. So I'm going to click that, place it here on the screen. Now this allows us to pull in images and movies into the Touchdesigner project. And what we want to do is recreate what we did on the Unity side in terms of building out that cube map. So we want to pull in the 6 images and also the reference image to help us reconstruct it over on this side. Now you may be wondering, well, why are we bothering to do this in the first place? Why are we creating this again in Touchdesigner, and why are we doing individual squares? Why not just send the entire cube map over? Why do we even create the cube map from individual squares in the first place? I mean, if you know anything about Unity or cube maps in general, you'll know that a cube map can be one image, and that one image can be imported into Unity and used. It's basically that cross that we looked at earlier. I mean, this is actually cube map, so this could be used in Unity as is, and it can be applied to a texture, and it would look fine. So why do we bother breaking this down into 6 individual squares, reconstructing it, and now doing it again in Touchdesigner? Well, the reason we did that is because there's a limit in terms of the size of the files that you can work with in Touchdesigner, and this is a non-commercial version. In the non-commercial version, you can only work with image resolutions of 1280 by 1280. Now, since we have a cube map that's made of 6 squares, each of which is 1024 by 1024, the overall cube map would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4K. So that would not work in Touchdesigner. We would not be able to bring in a 4K image, composite it, and then send it back to Unity unless we had a commercial version. Since I'm not going to be buying a commercial version of Touchdesigner, I'll work within the limitations of the non-commercial version by breaking down our cube map into 6 individual 10 by 24 images that we can then send across to Unity in 6 different image streams. So let's bring our first one over, and we're going to go right-click, hit Parameters, and one of the parameters that we care about is this one that says File. I'm going to click on the plus icon, and I already have it set up to go to the Unity project we were working on earlier with all the textures. And we're going to grab the cube map reference as our first image. Okay, and I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit so you can see it a little more clearly. And we're going to work the same way we did in Unity by using this as our reference to build out our cube map. So I'm going to just simply copy paste the reference. It's easy enough to do. I'm going to name this as MFI underscore reference, MFI for movie file in. You can name these whatever you like, just be consistent in any application you use so you don't get lost. Right now it's only 2 nodes, but once this gets more complicated, as in any application, you will be lost if your naming conventions aren't tight. So I'm going to zoom in there, and I'm going to call this top. Actually, I'm going to call it cube top. And we're going to right click, hit parameters, go into our files, and I know this is the top. And now we have the top of our cube. And we're going to work exactly the same way as we did in Unity, and we're going to rebuild our cube map here. Again, I'm going to speed this up, or maybe I'll do one more and then I'll speed it up just to make sure you get the idea of how it works here. So we're going to do Control-C, Control-V, drag this down, right-click, parameters. This is going to be back. And remember, the back is the top of the turtle there. Go into here. And where's the top of the turtle? I think it's right there, PZ. Here we go. And we're going to rename this one to back. All right, so we're going to build out the rest of this the same way. I'm going to just fast forward here. Okay, now that we have our cube map built, we can get rid of the reference because we don't need it anymore. And now we only need one more node to accomplish the goal of recreating this cube map here in Touchdesigner and sending it back across to Unity. And this node is called siphon spout out. And as I said earlier, Spout is a really great tool that allows you to connect various applications together. And in our case, since it's built into Touchdesigner, which is great, we can send out the image information to Unity, and Unity will receive it with Spout on the other end. So we're going to call this Spout left. I'm going to right click on the parameters, and I'm going to just simply call the sender name left. Sorry. I'm having trouble because I have my headset on while I'm doing this. Okay. So now sender name left will match up with the receiver name left on the Unity side, which we'll see in a moment. So now all we have to do is take a wire out here and connect it to the end of the left. Now, usually the way this is work is you'd be going right to left here. That would make a lot more sense. Let me just disconnect that. You would go out from the movie file in and then into Spout, and it would look like that. But I'm setting it up this way just so I can maintain the shape of the cross here, and so it's a little, it's a little wonky. You can see that, but that's fine. I'm also going to keep these smaller to distinguish one size from the other. See if I can tighten these up a bit. Okay, that's better. All right, we're going to continue now. So I'm going to just copy paste, disconnect, bring this up to the top here. I'm going to call this Spout top. I'm going to go from the out here to the in here. And I'm going to rename this to top. You'll notice this X here. That's just telling me that I need to rename it. Before it was just called, it was a duplicate of this one. It didn't like that. So now that we renamed it, that'll disappear. So we have Spout top. And we're going to continue in the same way. I'll do one more and then I'll fast forward. So I'm going to copy, paste, drag that down, disconnect, go from the out of the bottom to the in, call this Spout bottom, go to parameters, change the sender to bottom, and so on. Okay, now we're going to fast forward and I'll finish the others. Okay, now that we've completed all the spouts, we have a spout left, spout top, spout back, spout bottom, spout right, and spout front. And we save the project. So we're all ready to receive this image or receive these images back on the Unity side. Okay, before we go back over to Unity, we're going to need to add in a plugin in order for this to work. This is Clack Spout, and Clack Spout is a really excellent free plugin. You can read about it right here. Clack Spout is a Unity plugin that allows Unity to send and receive video streams using the Spout system. So it's a Unity implementation. It needs 2020.3 or later, which we have. And you're going to also need DirectX 11 or 12 support. So it's pretty straightforward as far as how to install it. So it's just going to this URL. I'll put this in the description down below. And you can follow along and install it into Unity. Once you have it installed, you can follow along with me here. So we're back in Unity here. This is the work we did earlier. This is our skybox. It's blue because I have just a little bit of fog to add to the effect. And I'm going to turn that off right now. Rendering, lighting, environment, and then we're just going to turn fog off. So this is the skybox we made earlier. No different, same exact one. And this skybox, as you know, is made up of quads that have materials that are holding these static textures that we brought in directly to Unity. And what we want to change is we want to change these static textures. We want to swap these out for the dynamic textures that we have here in Touchdesigner. And again, the reason we want to do that is because we're going to composite deform animations over the top of these individual images and then be able to see them play out in real time in various places of the skybox. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to set up something to receive each of these senders. Here in Unity, I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm going to name it TD for Touchdesigner Spout Receivers. And over here, I'm going to add a component, Spout Receiver. And this will be available to you after you install the Spout plugin. All we have to do is enter in the name of the sender as our source name and give the video stream something to be stored in. In this case, we need a target texture. And the kind of texture we need is something in Unity called a render texture. It's a dynamic texture that allows you to project camera information or information from other sources like Spout. So inside of our textures, let's clean this up a bit actually. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this static cube map. Images. And we're going to just put all these in here. And I'm going to throw the reference in there for good measure. And I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this folder Render Textures. We're going to right click and we're going to create our first render texture. We're going to call this TD for Touchdesigner Top. I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting TD Spout receivers, and I'm going to drag and drop this into the target texture. Okay, now that we have the render texture in the target texture slot, we want to make sure that the render texture is the proper size to receive the video stream. So we want 1024 by 1024. And as you can see right here, this represents the streamed texture that's coming from Touchdesigner. So just to prove that this is a live texture stream coming from Touchdesigner, keep your eye on this as I make some changes over here in Touchdesigner. This is the Spout top, which is the same as this. And what we'll do is we'll add in another operator in between called a level, which allows us to do some basic color correction. And go into parameters, and I'm going to just invert it. It's going to turn red. And now when I go back over to Unity, you can see as soon as I click on the Unity, it updates immediately. So I'm going to get rid of this level because I don't want this. Back to Unity, and we're back to where we were. So you can see we have a one-to-one connection between our images here in Touchdesigner and our render texture over here on the Unity side. So now that you have an idea of how this works, we'll, like we did before, we'll do another one or two, and then I'll fast forward. So let's do another one. Okay. So we're going to go into our TD Spout receivers. I'm going to copy component. Paste component is new. I'm going to change top to back. I'm going to Control D to duplicate this. I'm going to change this to back. So now we have TD back. It's already set up to be the proper size, so that's good. And to make sure that TD back is receiving back from Spout on the Touchdesigner side. And let's click on back, and you can see this is the back, which is the same as this image right here on the Touchdesigner side. So let's keep going. Okay, now that we have all of our render textures built, and you can see as I go through these, we have the back, the bottom, the front, the left, the right, and the top. And they're all 1024 by 1024. And when we reconstruct them, they will look the same as our static textures, which is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to go into our skybox. We're going to start at quad top. We're going to go into the material, and we're going to start loading in these other textures. Instead of the regular top, which is the static top that came from here, we're going to load in TD top. Keep an eye on the box and back. And bottom. You'll notice as we load in the surface map, we get this little checkerboard and lock icon to know that we're dealing with a render texture. Let's go to left. and right. Finally, front. Okay, let's tumble around using the Alt key and left mouse, see if anything looks weird. It does not. It looks very good. Going a little closer. It looks exactly the same as it did before. Okay, now just to prove out that we actually have a dynamic cube here with textures that are being streamed from Touchdesigner, I'm going to do exactly what I did before. I'm going to grab one of these Spout nodes. I'm going to insert an operator. We're going to grab a level. And I'm going to go into parameters. And I'm going to crank up the invert to make it look like something ugly like that. So when I come back into Unity, we see that that is indeed the bottom, and it looks red and weird. And it shows that we have a live stream of image data coming from Touchdesigner, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to get rid of this. Come back to Unity to restore it. I'm going to save my work here. And we are done for now with the second part of this tutorial, and in good shape to start integrating Deforum animations in the next tutorial. So I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave any questions in the comments below. Please do subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to be updated when the next tutorial comes out. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when the next part of this tutorial becomes available.